Welcome to Corbin's Coasters and More. This is getting close to Halloween, and I had the pleasure of going to HHN last Wednesday, and it was a whole lot of fun. I also got to go to Busch Gardens Howl-O-Scream in Tampa, and I'm going to make a separate little video about that. Now, the video quality is not going to be the best. I only get to go to this once per year because it's a separate ticketed event, so I focus on having fun. So I'm just going to show you some clips I found from their website and otherwise pictures. I don't want to show you anything that anyone filmed inside the houses because that kind of spoils some of it if you choose to go, which you should. It's really fun. The cost is around $80 to $100 per person depending on the night. But you get 10 haunted houses and 5 scare zones, you get a show, and it's really a good value for what you pay. And you can get a season pass for not too much more than that. But I had a free night that came with my season pass because I have the tier of pass that gives you that, so that's great. Just so you know, this episode is also sponsored by American Express. The link below can get you up to 100,000 bonus points, which would more than pay for your trip to HHN, including the hotel and the haunts. So give that click a link. If you get approved, you get a ton of bonus points. Now I'm going to do this in the order that these are on the HHN website, on Universal Orlando's site. So first up is their featured house, The Weekend After Hours Nightmare. This is going through basically his music videos, so they say. It's more like going through a nightclub. There's lots of mirrors, lots of strobe lights, lots of colors. You do get a lot of those famous plastic surgery creatures that were in the Super Bowl halftime show. I do like the theme. You do get a lot of his music, which is good. I like the low beat, creepy kind of music. And overall, it is pretty good. It's the first one I did because I figured the line would get long on it, which, yeah, that's true. I'll give you some tips at the end. And it was really a lot of fun. Not the best house overall. I will give this one a 5 of 10. It wasn't the scariest, it wasn't the most themed, but it was fun. The second on the list is Halloween. I didn't do this one, mostly because, and you can hate me for it, I've never seen Halloween and have very little interest in it. I've heard good things about this house, but I did not go through it. Did not make it at the end of the night. Horrors of Blumhouse, Twice the Screams, Twice the Terror. Now, I've never seen either of these movies either. This one was based off of the movies Freaky and The Black Phone, and this one was done as 2 separate haunted houses. You only have to wait in one line, which I did like that, because it broke it up for you and you started fresh. I thought the Freaky side was really, really scary. It was the scariest house. It was the darkest of the houses, I think. There was a lot of, the movie apparently is about a kid who gets kidnapped, put in a basement, and he's trying to get out, something along those lines. It was really a lot of fun. I thought it was the scariest house overall. And then the Black Phone, which has the scarier mask. The Black Phone was actually not as scary. So maybe I have the movies mixed up too, I don't know. But there was one spot where the guy stomped so hard in the Black Phone room that I thought he chopped my toes off. I actually had to look down. That was the single scariest moment of the entire night. So combined, I'm going to give the Blumhouse a 7 out of 10. Scary, but nothing special on the theming in my opinion. Then you have Universal Monsters Legends Collide, Wolfman, Dracula, The Mummy. Not a huge fan of this one. It was really just The Mummy. I don't know if I saw any of the others. It's nothing like last year's Legends House where they had you could get a different monster at the end every time. It was basically like walking through the queue of the Mummy ride. And there were haunts based on that, more or less. It was way too bright, especially for being themed after that queue, which is the darkest queue anywhere. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. It wasn't all that scary. Now, I'm scared pretty easily on these things, but it wasn't that great. So 3 out of 10. Spirits of the Coven. This one was like a 1920s casino speakeasy mixed in with witches, which I thought was kind of a cool theme. It was one of the longest houses, maybe the longest house. And the only thing is, I didn't really get that it was supposed to be witches. If it wasn't called Spirits of the Coven, I would have thought it was just a 20s speakeasy theme. I think it would have been cooler if they went with gangsters, actually, like zombie gangsters or something. But I did like the theme overall. I liked walking through the casinos and the bars and the distillery. I thought it was really interesting. And there were a lot of well done effects on this one. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Really good. You definitely should go through this one. Then you got Bugs Eaten Alive. And this one was the most different house. This was less about jump scares and more about gross scares, I'll call them. It was kind of done as a 50s commercial for bug spray like Raid, and it goes wrong. You're going into these houses, and it's really got some kind of realistic bug effects. There are a few scare actors dressed as basically massive bugs, but it's more about just going through and being kind of grossed out, creeped out. There is a spot where the wind is moving at a pace that it feels like bugs are hitting you. I thought that was one of the coolest effects of the night. I'd say it's probably the most divisive house, but I like theming over jump scares. So I give this one a 9 out of 10. I think it's really worth it, and it's backed by the show, which the main show of the night was Halloween Nightmare Fuel Wildfire. This was a repeat from last year, and it is fantastic. There's pyro, aerial performers, sexy women and men. It reminds me a lot of Zumanity, which is a show that's now closed, but it was a Cirque du Soleil show in Vegas. Lots of sexiness. There's magic. There's just loud music, fire twirlers, everything. It's one of those shows. It's not kid friendly at all. This whole event is not kid friendly. I would recommend not bringing your kid, not just because kids can handle haunted houses. A lot of kids can, but there are a lot of really like sexual themes to some of the stuff. A lot of very revealing outfits. If you're fine with that, good on you. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but the show is definitely like PG-15 rated, at least. It's very, very sexy, and to me, such a good way. I recommend not missing the show. Make sure you go see it. They also have a fountain show called Ghoulish. I didn't see it, but I'm also not that interested in fountain shows, especially if it's going to take my time from going through one of the houses. Back to houses, we got Fiesta de Chupacabras. This was my most disappointed I was in any house. I thought the theming was not as good as it could have been. I was expecting more like bright Mexican colors everywhere, kind of like festival, Day of the Dead kind of stuff. But it was like walking through the back streets of a Mexican town, kind of felt like where you aren't supposed to be as a tourist. And the Chupacabras were pretty cool. There were a couple areas where there were nice big rooms where you could kind of get lost for a second looking around and get scared from multiple angles. Not as many jump scares as I expected. I think I might have gone on shift change on this one. But I'm going to give it a 5. It wasn't bad. I do recommend you go through it, but don't make this your priority. The only other one I skipped was Hellblock Horror, which is a prison-themed one, which really interests me, but I read so many reviews that were so bad, and every time I look at the waits for this one, it's below 20 minutes, even when everything else is 60 and 70. So, to me, I guess if this is your last thing, do it, but I have heard almost nothing good about the house. But again, no personal experience with it, so I do know for a fact, though, that this was supposed to be a different house that they lost the rights to last minute, so they didn't have very long to develop this house, so I think it's mostly just jump scare after jump scare without much going on. Then we have Dead Man's Pier Winter's Wake. This one was absolutely incredible. This was in a soundstage, and they used every bit of it. There were stuff up high, down low, left and right, everywhere you looked. You get greeted by the zombie ghost pirate bartender as you walk in, which was really cool. And this one had probably the least jump scares out of any of the houses, maybe except for bugs. But wow, the theming was just incredible. This literally could be a dark ride at Epic Universe and nobody would be mad. It would be actually really, really cool as a dark ride. You're walking through what really feels like a full-size pirate ship. When you go outside on the deck, there is wind and mist and ocean smells. At a certain point, you look in the distance, there's another ship sinking. It's a full-size ship with a winch on top. You look up and there's stuff on top of the ship. And I know every single review that you look of this is going to say this is the best house of the year. It's probably the best house I've ever been through. It's a 10 out of 10 for sure. I could go back and just walk through this house 3 or 4 times, probably in a row, and not be disappointed. Even though this one usually does have the longest waits. I got really lucky and only waited like 30 minutes. This one's usually over an hour, and it is absolutely worth it. Do not leave without going on Dead Man's Pier. It is amazing. Then the last one, Descendants of Destruction. I actually went on this one by accident because I thought I was going on a different house. I don't remember what one it's beside, but I thought I was going to the other one. Turns out it was Descendants of Destruction. I was like, wait a minute, why is there a subway in this house? An abandoned subway. So that is part of it. You're going through like the abandoned, destroyed, post-apocalyptic subway scene in New York. And this one was probably the scariest of all of them. I don't know if it's because I was surprised because I really didn't know what I was going into. This one had jump scares around every corner. And the monsters looked really scary. There was a lot to look at. Being a fairly realistic Mad Max style post-apocalyptic scene. So I liked this one quite a bit, and I would give it a 7 out of 10. So there were a lot of good ones. There were only a couple great ones, though. And then, of course, Dead Man's Pier was absolutely incredible. Now, I told you I'd give you a couple tips, and this is because I do look at the wait times almost every day, even though I'm not there. First of all, Wednesdays have not been busy at all this year. Last year, they were still pretty crowded. This year, not at all. You're looking at 30 minutes probably being your longest wait all night, maybe 40. When I went, there were no food lines. There were no drink lines. The show, you could get in very easily, even if you were close to showtime. And it's cheaper. I definitely recommend, if you can, go on a Wednesday. Saturdays, the waits are ranging from 60 to 90 minutes up until midnight, and after midnight, they kind of cool down. One of the tips is, for sure, if you can, especially if you have a season pass, you can do this. Or if you have a daytime pass for that day. If you're in the park before they close at 5 o'clock, you can get into a holding zone before 5. And they usually open certain houses for those people around 6. And at 6, you can go to those houses, as many as you want. Meanwhile, other people are not even allowed in until 7, which we got there at 6:45, and they did allow us in a little early. So it kind of just depends on how ready they are, I think. But you definitely get at least half an hour to yourselves. And from everything I've seen and heard from people, you can easily go through 2 or 3 houses in that 30 or 40 minutes and really get a jump start. So especially if you go on a Saturday and you have the ability to be in the park during the day, take advantage of that. Also, like I said, after midnight, the lines get a lot shorter. So if you can stay all night, do it. Go see the show before midnight. Go eat before midnight. And now I did have one food item. The food item was the Twisted Tater. I thought it was great. It was spicy, dusted in like some sort of spicy sauce and flaming hot Cheetos. It was really good. I almost tried the black Philly cheesesteak, which looked good. I just wasn't hungry enough for it. For drinks, they do have a good selection of beers. They had a pumpkin ale, I know. They had some sort of sour. What I was drinking all night long, though, with my fiance was this really, really incredible cider from Keel and Curly Farms, which is actually local. It's in Plant City. And it was pecan pie cider. You can't even get this at their cidery. I went and tried. It's only available at Universal right now, and it is possibly the best tasting drink I've ever had. I drank a lot of them. So definitely give that a try. Now, I will say one thing that is interesting, it's good and bad. Every single food and drink booth is exactly the same throughout the park. So the cocktails are the same, the beer selection is the same, the food selection is the same. Except I know there's a food truck in San Francisco that might have some different food items, I think. But that drink was so good, so I'm glad they had it at every single bar. My other tip is, as with most theme parks, if you go at rope drop, when the park opens, go to the back of the park first, especially because the holding zones are in New York and San Francisco, so those houses are already going to have people in them. Get to the back of the park over by Men in Black. And especially if you want to ride something too, all the rides were short waits all night, but Men in Black will have a 5-minute wait when you get back there. If it's the first thing you do, it won't take much of your time. The houses back there won't have much of a wait. You can see a show while you're back there and then come to the front of the park later once everyone's already done that. And you may notice I didn't mention the scare zones and rank them. That's because I found them pretty boring. They weren't scary. And you have 5. You have Horrors of Halloween, Scarecrow Cursed Soil, Sweet Revenge, Graveyard Deadly Unrest, and Conjure the Dark. I didn't find any of them all that interesting. I didn't find any of them to be that scary. And even the one coming in the park, I didn't find to be that good, which I think they kind of need to work on that, because after going to Busch Gardens as well, that's something Busch Gardens does very well, is the scare zones. So keep your eyes open for a Busch Gardens video as well. I'm going to try to have it up in the next week. That way it's actually useful for this year. Busch Gardens reuses a couple of their houses every year, where Halloween Horror Nights is 10 new houses every single year, which is what gives you the value for sure. So I definitely recommend going. Like I said, go on a Wednesday if you can. But otherwise, it's a great experience either way. Take my ratings with a grain of salt. Obviously, everyone has their own opinions, but I would say, the ones that are lower rated, probably think about, if you have to skip one, maybe make those the ones you skip. If you really aren't interested in bugs, don't go to the bugs one. So this is meant more as just like to help you out, a little guide to HHN. And even without my own video, I hope you enjoyed this. And thanks for watching Corbin's Go-To.